Crows are the obvious place to begin, because crows have been caught in the act more thoroughly than almost any other animal. In a now famous experiment at the University of Washington, a researcher walked through a campus wearing a particular caveman mask while trapping wild American crows. He released them unharmed. Then he walked away. For years afterward, anyone who put on that same mask was mobbed the moment they stepped outside, even by crows that had been chicks, even by crows that had migrated in from elsewhere. The information had spread through the local population the way a rumor moves through a small town. The face was marked. The mask was guilty. What makes this unsettling is not the aggression itself. Many animals attack threats. What makes it unsettling is the precision. Crows do not mob every human who walks past. They wait for that face. They teach each other that face. And the punishment can stretch across more than a decade, longer than many human grudges last. A crow that was wronged in 2010 might still be screaming about it in 2024, and its grandchildren might be screaming with it. The next case lives in salt water, and it complicates things further because elephants of the sea seem to keep ledgers too. Killer whales, particularly the populations off the coast of Spain and Portugal, have spent the last several years systematically dismantling sailing yachts. They ram the rudders. They strip away fiberglass. They work in teams. The leading hypothesis points to a single female, sometimes called White Gladys by researchers, who is believed to have suffered a traumatic collision with a vessel. Whether her behavior afterward qualifies as revenge or simply as defensive teaching, the result has been the same. Younger orcas have copied her. They now hunt boats the way their ancestors hunted tuna. Insurers have paid out claims. Sailors have abandoned routes. A grudge, if that is what it is, has redrawn shipping lanes. Orca culture is built on memory. They follow matriarchs into their 70s and 80s, animals who carry the maps of every reef, every feeding ground, every danger their pod has ever encountered. If one of those matriarchs decides that a certain shape on the surface is a threat, that decision can echo through 3 generations of whales. There is no court. There is no appeal. There is only the rudder and the silence around it. Elephants belong here too, and their case is perhaps the saddest because the targets of their memory are almost always us. In northeastern India and parts of Sri Lanka, wildlife officers have documented elephants returning to specific villages, sometimes years after a calf was killed there, and singling out particular houses. Not random homes. Not the closest homes. The home of the person involved. They will trample crops elsewhere, but in the marked house they break walls, scatter belongings, and leave. The behavior is rare. It is also consistent enough that local authorities now keep records of it. Elephants have brains roughly 4 times the mass of ours, with extraordinary development in regions tied to memory and emotion. They mourn their dead. They recognize the bones of their kin years after death. They distinguish human languages, reacting more anxiously to the speech of groups historically associated with hunting them than to the speech of groups they consider neighbors. Asking whether such a creature can hold a grudge is almost the wrong question. The better question is whether they could possibly forget. A different scale of grudge plays out among chimpanzees, our nearest relatives, and here the behavior has been studied so long that researchers no longer dance around the word. Chimps remember slights. They remember theft of food. They remember which member of the troop refused to groom them last week, and they refuse in return. Jane Goodall and her successors documented attacks that occurred days, sometimes weeks after the original offense, and almost always against the specific individual who caused it. Chimpanzees have been seen waiting silently in trees for a rival to pass beneath, dropping on him, and then walking away as if the matter were now settled. In some communities, low-ranking males have spent months building alliances solely to ambush a single dominant male they hated. When the strike finally comes, it is brutal, coordinated, and final. This is not anger as a flash of heat. This is anger held cold for a long time. The capacity to plan a response, to wait for the right moment, to keep the target in mind across many sunrises, requires a kind of memory most animals do not possess. Chimps possess it. They use it. And occasionally, when conditions align, they use it on humans who have hurt them. Camels deserve their reputation here, even if cinema has exaggerated it. Bedouin tradition has long warned that a camel will remember mistreatment for years, and modern handlers across Central Asia and the Middle East tend to agree. There are reports, some verified by veterinary services, of camels biting or kicking specific people years after a confrontation, while remaining gentle with everyone else in the same stable. One often cited Mongolian case described a working camel that turned and crushed a herder months after he had beaten it during a trek. The animal was calm in every other interaction. It had simply been waiting. Camels do not have the cognitive architecture of an elephant or a chimp, but they do have remarkable spatial memory and a strong capacity to associate individuals with experiences. In the desert, where the same water hole may be the difference between life and death, knowing who can be trusted is not a luxury. It is survival. The capacity for grudge may simply be the dark side of a brain built to never forget the shape of a stranger. Among smaller animals, swans rarely make headlines for vengeance, but ornithologists who study them know better. Mute swans, the elegant white birds that drift across European park ponds, are violently territorial and apparently capable of recognizing repeat offenders. There are documented cases of swans attacking the same rower, the same dog walker, the same kayaker every single morning, while ignoring everyone else on the same water. In England, one swan known locally as Asbo was relocated multiple times for repeatedly targeting a small group of rowers from a single club. He never bothered the swimmers. He never bothered the fishermen. He had decided who his enemies were, and the relocations did not change his mind. Swans live 2 to 3 decades in the wild, sometimes longer, and they form bonds with their territory that are almost legalistic. Trespass once, and they will warn you. Trespass twice, and they will mark you. From that point on, the river is yours only by their permission, and the permission can be revoked. Now we move into murkier waters, into a creature whose grudges have an almost mythic quality. The leopard. In the foothills of the Himalayas and across parts of Central Africa, there are old accounts, some dating back to colonial-era hunting records, of leopards that began targeting the specific villages of hunters who had wounded them. The pattern is striking. A leopard is shot but escapes. Weeks later, livestock begins disappearing only from the offending hamlet. Then dogs. Then, in a small handful of cases, people. Other villages, sometimes within walking distance, are left untouched. How much of this is accurate biology and how much is the imagination of frightened communities is genuinely difficult to untangle. What we do know is that leopards are extraordinary at recognizing individual prey, that they can track scent across enormous distances, and that wounded leopards do shift their hunting patterns toward easier targets, which often means human-occupied areas. Whether that shift includes a deliberate fixation on a specific aggressor is harder to prove. But the consistency of the stories, across continents and centuries, suggests something more than coincidence. The leopard, in this telling, is not just a predator. It is a creditor. Octopuses bring the question into stranger territory because they should not, by any conventional logic, be capable of holding grudges at all. They are invertebrates. They live short, solitary lives. They have no parents, no community, no culture to inherit. And yet, in laboratory after laboratory, octopuses have been documented spraying water at specific researchers they dislike, refusing food from particular handlers, and ambushing the hands of people who once handled them roughly. In one well-known account from a New Zealand aquarium, an octopus named Inky escaped at night, slid across the floor, and made it back to the sea after months of apparently planning his exit, watching the staff, learning the schedule. Octopus intelligence is alien. 2/3 of their neurons live in their arms. They appear to dream. They solve problems most mammals fail at. And while it would be a stretch to claim that an octopus stews on an insult the way a chimp does, the behavior pattern is hard to dismiss. They distinguish individuals. They remember the unkind. They respond accordingly. For an animal whose lineage split from ours more than 500 million years ago, the convergence is unnerving. Wolves enter the script not because they are violent toward humans, but because among themselves their politics are merciless. A wolf that has been humiliated by a higher-ranking pack member will sometimes wait through entire seasons for an opportunity to challenge that wolf, often when the rival is sick, injured, or distracted. Field studies in Yellowstone have recorded males who appeared submissive for over a year, then struck when leadership weakened, taking the alpha role with a brutality that suggested long planning rather than sudden ambition. Pack life is built on memory of who slighted whom, who shared meat, who refused to share, who stood beside you at the kill, and who lagged behind. Wolves are not vengeful in a cinematic sense. They are something quieter and arguably more dangerous. They keep score. This brings us to perhaps the strangest case of all, and the one researchers still struggle to explain in tidy terms. The honey badger. By body size it is unremarkable. By temperament it is something else entirely. There are credible field reports of honey badgers returning, sometimes night after night, to the camps of people who interfered with them, dismantling traps, biting through tent stakes, and seeking out specific bags or boxes that had previously been used to handle them. In southern Africa, beekeepers have described honey badgers learning the routes of vehicles that disturb their dens and shadowing those vehicles for miles. The animal does not appear to fear consequences in any normal sense. It calculates. It returns. It takes what it considers owed. The honey badger's brain-to-body ratio is unusually high for a mustelid, and its problem-solving in captivity has occasionally exceeded that of some primates. It opens locks. It stacks objects to climb. And it remembers. Whatever combination of traits produced this animal, evolution seems to have written into it a refusal to let things slide. Few creatures of its size live with such confidence, and almost none seem to consider retaliation a default rather than a last resort. Step back from these cases, and a strange picture begins to form. Revenge, in the human sense, may be too strong a word. Animals do not write down their grievances. They do not seek justice as an abstract idea. But the building blocks of vengeance, identity recognition, long-term memory, social communication, and goal-directed aggression exist across more species than we used to believe. In some animals, these elements arrive together, and what emerges looks remarkably like a grudge. The crow that hates the mask, the orca that breaks rudders, the elephant that finds the right house, the chimpanzee that waits in the tree. Why this trait exists at all is the deeper question. Holding a grudge costs energy. It uses brain space that could be spent on food, mating, or rest. Evolution rarely tolerates such costs unless they pay for themselves. The likely answer is that in social, intelligent species, the willingness to retaliate, even after a delay, is what keeps cooperation honest. If others know you will not forget, they are less likely to harm you in the first place. Memory becomes a form of armor. Patience becomes a weapon. And what we read as cruelty or pettiness in animals may instead be one of the oldest social technologies on Earth, older than law, older than language, older than us. It also means that when we share a landscape with these species, we are not simply dealing with reflexes or instincts. We are dealing with histories. Every elephant we have ever scared. Every crow we have ever shouted at. Every leopard we have ever wounded. They carry those moments with them, and sometimes they carry them home. The line between predator and prey gets blurred when the prey has a memory that lasts a lifetime. So the next time something locks eyes with you in the wild, take a moment before you assume it has forgotten you. It may know you better than you think, and it may be deciding what kind of debt is between you. If this kind of deeper look at the hidden minds of animals interests you, stay with the channel for more.